Imagine opening your email to find years of history deleted. Only a single email remains. A ransomware request for $2 million. You think to yourself, how could this happen to me? You see, there's two types of companies. Those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. The weight of responsibility comes crashing down on you. It's the sort of responsibility you feel when your family is craving a delicious pizza. You finally open the box only to find the most cringeworthy topping that you mistakenly ordered. Join Pineapple on Pizza podcast as John and George, along with guest executives, discuss the most common and craziest cybersecurity risks, followed by actionable tips and strategies that can be implemented to protect your cyber risk pie. Pineapple on Pizza is hosted by Omnistruct.
Welcome to another episode of Pineapple on Pizza. Today we have an amazing guest who is president at Explore Mars, CEO of Janet's Planet, cosmic educator, STEM champion, guardian and shepherdess of the next generation of space explorers, and an American Astronautical Society 2022 recipient of the Sally K. Wright Excellence in Education Award. Welcome, Janet.
Hi there.
Well, the real question is, do you like pizza, right? That's the important question.
I love pizza, and I have a funny story about the first astronaut that took pizza to space. His name is astronaut Don Thomas, and he was part of the space shuttle program. And he tells the story to kids. It's pretty funny that he loves pizza. Anytime he returned, he did 4 space shuttle missions. He would always come home and he'd be ordering a pepperoni pizza. And so they get a sandwich that as they sit, and they get buckled in and everything. And normally they get a sandwich they put in their pocket. So I forget his second or third mission. He goes, hey, I don't know if it'd be possible, but could I have a slice of pizza instead of a sandwich? And so they said yes. And it's a great image of him out there. So astronaut Don Thomas, if this comes up in a trivia night sometime, is the first guy to take a small personal pan pepperoni pizza to space.
Oh, that's a lot of history like that.
And that's got to be a pretty big pocket for a personal pan pizza, right? I mean,
yeah, it's like but those astronaut pockets, they got lots of room in them. So I'm guessing that worked out pretty well.
Apparently. Well, that's great. So we're going to start off with our main question here. So if cyber risk was a pizza and the framework was a crust, what is the riskiest topping you've seen, and what topping would you equate that to?
I think the weirdest thing I've ever seen is squid ink. And that was somewhere in Asia. So that's what I would equate it to. It was terrible. And I tried to be kind with my host that was offering that to me. For me, it's like just in regular life, it's like mushrooms. I can't stand mushrooms. It's like they stink. I don't like them. So for me, it's like squid ink and mushrooms would be the worst possible thing on a pizza. And that represents to me those unsavory things, at least to me, that I'm always trying to protect the innocence of children. And so those would be my most unsavory choices.
Okay, so those would be very risky for you on
risky.
And yes.
Yeah. For my husband, it would probably be jalapenos, which I totally love, right? So that goes to the point that everybody's bit of risk is going to look different. For me, my risk happened when I started, when mostly I've been out touring and doing Janet's Planet or doing camps or being live in front of kids. The pandemic happens, I switch everything to virtual. And I was dumb. I didn't know that there were bad actors who would, of all things, decide to Zoom bomb with some pornographic images right in the middle of teaching about the solar system. And I was heart-stricken the day that I had 76 kids online with me from around the globe, and these images populate. And again, your mind is just trying to shut everything down. And again, it just was like, oh, and, gratefully there've been some, major steps in protection there. But that for me is what I worry about most, is that, I've got a granddaughter who's 13 who has her, a limited kind of like phone, but she still gets spam text messages. And so I just go, it's not right. How do we keep everything safe? And especially, I think about how much I have tried to adhere to the, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, making sure that I gather no back-end information when somebody visits my website. I can't do that on my YouTube channel. It's like, because I'm children's content and made for children and the things out there, I'm not collecting that data. I cannot in good conscience and would not. But it's like, that's what I think that's what troubles me the most. Or if something were to populate on my website, or there's some robots hitting, some of my social media platforms in undesirable ways, or there's spoofs of something out there. And it's just annoying. I'm like, hey, people, eat some good pizza, whatever your flavor is, but leave other people's pizza alone. So that's my stand on my pizza box here. So
that sounds like that's what keeps you up at night is those people jumping in your pizza and throwing extra mushrooms and squid ink on
squidding.
there.
Yeah. It's like, keep that stuff to yourself, right? It's like, you have your pizza your way, have it your way, but just don't trample on the innocence of children. Vanderbilt University did a study some years back saying that 10 was the new 15. And my guess is that age might even be closer to 8 or 9. Might be the new 15 in some ways, with the way that kids relate to, the media and other things, which is scary, right? I heard you, George, go. And, for that, it's like, even trying to, as I work with kids, it's like I worked with I was doing a teaching residency at a school here in Nashville about 2 weeks ago. And there were 4 girls in this 5th grade class that I was like, wow, I could not believe the attitude that was kind of dripping off of them. But I understand it in some ways, because they've had to learn how to manage themselves and carry themselves with a bit of like, hey, don't mess with me. So I just hope that, in the age of artificial intelligence, I know a guy in Canada who calls himself kind of like this ambassador for artificial intelligence. You guys should interview Evandro. He's amazing. But he's saying all the time, he goes, it's not AI that's bad, that can be used as a tool. You can use it smartly. Like, I know some creators who are using Chat GPT to basically, hey, help me flesh out this idea. They're not asking it to write it for them. They're saying, hey, give me a template, throw out some ideas that keep those creative juices going. So Evandro's whole thing is like, he goes, I don't worry about the AI taking over. He goes, I just worry about dumb people using it in a bad way. So he might have used some other words, but I'm still keeping it PG, G and PG.
Well, and I'm hoping like 50 is the new 35, so that there's a little, between the 15 and now. I'm just kidding.
Oh, we can only hope, right? I'm all for that. I'm 29. It's like, this is how I started calculating birthdays in the last couple of years. The Earth suit might be 56 here on planet Earth, but on Mars, it's 29.4. So that's how I'm calculating birthdays now. It's like, how old am I on Mars? 29.4. There you go.
And this year I'm celebrating my 29th birthday again.
And again.
So in your business, do you have any challenges when you're meeting regulatory requirements today, specifically for your business?
I think my biggest thing is that if we're doing kind of anything on the internet, it's like we really try to, like, if we're providing iPads, for example, or say, sometimes it's like we'll get computers kind of like say, hey, you can use these. And we make sure that there are any number of, like, there's no access to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, right? There's no access unless we've got something very specific. We try to load those videos on. Again, what would worry me the most is if the kids came and were participating online in some place, and then something occurred either during or after and followed them home. So we make sure, the other regulatory things that I make sure that, even we've got a contest called the Mars Innovation Challenge. Anybody listening out there, K through 18, we've got a great contest and a challenge. You can find it at exploremars.org. Go under the education tab there. It's a $2,400 cash prize. The semifinalists will get to meet with a subject matter expert. But, we are not going to, like, we will want to share some of those videos, but we go, do not tell us where you are from, except in your submission. Do not say your last name or where you're from or how old you are, any of those kinds of things in your video. We have to have something signed by the parents, or your submission is null and void. And I've done this for other companies, and it's always hard. You'll get a great submission, but you don't have a valid, when you follow up and go, just making sure that your child did submit for this, and then there's no response. We just can't afford those kinds of possibilities of
Right.
revealing a kid. I mean, the other things, it's like when I go into a school, some of my marketing folks and, my agents that book me things are like, you never take enough pictures. And I'm like, I'm busy doing the work. But I always have to ask, is there anyone in this classroom or in this auditorium that should not or does not need to be photographed? And you'll occasionally get those. And sometimes they could be everything from their parent has a sensitive job, they may be from another country, and or they may be in the foster care system, and or under, you never know, because it's like, I don't come in a lot of times to these situations really knowing the kids on an personal level. I'm coming in for maybe a day or a week or
Right.
something like that. So we try to look at every possible scenario that could happen. I mean, it's everything from, if it's online, when we were after we recovered from the Zoom bombing, it's like we made sure that there was a better kind of registration thing. But here is the problem when you make it difficult with a password. It's not so much that people don't have access to maybe a phone or Wi-Fi. Like, we can get that pretty publicly. I mean, there's still some areas that might be hard to do. But if you're, say, a student K-5, and your parent hands you the phone and says, all right, here, just click on that. The parent walks away, maybe they're at work. We even had kids whose parents were working, and you knew they were in the back of the store someplace. But then if it's another whole step of entering your name or plugging in a password, we found that sometimes we go, why is everybody not here? And then you'd hear, oh, we had difficulty doing that. So then you kind of regenerate or your Zoom information all the time. So sometimes it comes down to like, how can this be the most accessible to parents and students and make it the most easy, yet make it the most safe? And to me, that is my biggest kind of probably struggle with the regulatory stuff. And again, I don't communicate personally with the kids. I only communicate with the parents. And then it's only after some time. Right now, I've had some of these kids now for 3 years. Now their parents, if they say, hey, mom said it was okay for me to email you, I need a recommendation letter. And now I'm on a personal enough level with all of these people after the last 3 years online with them that I go, okay, sure, that's no problem. But again, all it would take, guys, is one moment to be interpreted in an unsavory way, and I'm done. It is over. And so really, it's like one of the ways that I love working with kids is just doing it super lo-fi. Let's get some paper plates and some straws, and let's, you know what I mean? Or let's get a soda bottle and make a water rocket or a stomp rocket, because I want to push the technology, right? But I also want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to be as safe as possible. Even with great programs, are you guys familiar with, is it Scratch? What is that program where they can kind of like code a little game? It's block programming, and it's great, but it's like they can have friends, and then the people can find them. And then you start to worry, is like, will these people say anything nice about what they've coded in that? I guess it's akin to,
that's an MIT project, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And, again, you just go, like, I had one student who had a quirky idea of animation, and it could go a little dark. And so you're like, hi, that is very interesting. And, and when she would share it, you're going, hey, let's just, maybe not right now, or maybe just show me first before we share it with other people. So it's a jumble. It feels like you're always trying to read the room with kids and quickly assess. And online is different. We had kids that, would eventually tell you in a private chat on Zoom, hey, I've got my camera off because I don't want you to hear mom and dad arguing, or I don't want you to see my messy room or house. So it's just, you want I think it's like it comes down to like my heart is to serve kids anywhere and everywhere that I can, but then sometimes having to put that really hard fence in and go, unless you meet these criteria, babies, you cannot continue in this fashion. So yeah, it's like the regulatory stuff for me is like, hey, I don't care about collecting all the info. It'd be nice, then I could market and sell you something, but I'm good with honoring that. I'm good with not tracking your data or keeping it or emailing you and those kinds of things. That to me is the easy part. The harder part is, how do I keep them safe when they are in my program, online with me, or in person? And yeah, that's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah. And actually, you mentioned something in there also that I think everybody struggles with, which is the balance of security, adding that extra password and adding the other pieces and the encryption and all the other things that make it a little bit more difficult, and that ease of use. So there's that balance between those two items that every organization struggles with. I mean, and I can just imagine when you're trying to deal with children, that becomes even more so, because let's face it, don't take the time to read or understand what they're seeing sometimes. And so that makes sense that you struggle with that. And I think everybody does struggle with that from an organizational standpoint.
Sure, because it's like you go, I can make it easy and not put a password there. But then if a bad actor happens to get a hold of that link, then they go, well, Janet, was this password protected? Then I'm all fingers are pointing back at me. Why didn't you? And then if a kid can't join and a parent's upset about it, and you're right on the people don't read the emails. That's why I feel like it's a really brusque way to communicate, but I love the bullet pointed emails. Here's this, and this. Love you, mean it, bye, see you there. Because otherwise you make it too long. We've got the attention spans of gnats anymore anyway, even as adults in our YouTube, like we've adapted. It's like, I used to could sit and read a book, and it's like, now it's like, oh my gosh, give me an award. I just sat and read a chapter in a book holding it. It's like profound. But I think the hope that I have is that, most kids are pretty savvy. It's like, it's usually the ones that maybe have some difficulty in their home that you worry about more about how they may use the internet if the grownups aren't helping out with that. We've done some things sometimes when we're doing camps, and we'll send some helpful hints to grownups that, ways to monitor. I mean, we had a kid, speaking of just parental involvement. And hey, guys, I'm a Jan. I got 4 grandbabies ranging from 13 all the way down to 5. This past week, we've had my 8 and 5-year-old here at the house, and it'll wear you down. It will wear you down. I get it. But this kid came to our camp, and he had been a little ADHD in 2019. And so here we are back in 2021, and he was falling apart by 11:30, wanted to lay down, wanted to take a nap. And we're like, are you sick? What? And we finally figured out about the 3rd day that he was staying up all night playing Fortnite. And so if you want your kids safe, take the darn apparatus away, plug it in, get it out of sight. It's like, now it's bedtime. And, there are all kinds of reports. I think it's going to be interesting to see, as we are living with these digital natives who easily can fix my phone when something goes awry, but figuring out how they retain information. They may retain it fine because they've always learned that way, but it also can be that addictive high, that dopamine kind of hit for like, oh, I just leveled up, so I got to keep playing. So, to me, there's also some checks and balances. It's like, I know there are games now that after so many attempts and you don't level up, it makes you wait for 20 minutes, which I really applaud, because I go, yeah, let's go do something else while we wait for you to level up to whatever else it is. But it's hard to monitor that. And I know that grownups are like, I just need 5 minutes to finish a text or an email or fix dinner. And the device has kind of replaced the babysitter in a lot of ways.
Well, and then the other thing is why memorize something that you can look up? I've seen that in some of the children as well. So they have that attention span, maybe. And then as soon as you're done, you could ask them what they watched, and they'd be like, I don't know, that was 5 minutes ago, right? And so there's that part of it too, that are they actually retaining some of that? And how's that going to work out long term?
But you know what? Like I said, I want to talk about the hopeful things. For the kids that joined me, they're about 30. And it's like, again, I Zoomed with over 10,000 between March of 2020 and June of 2021. Part of that time I was underneath the NASA Next Gen STEM grant. But kids are still looking for community, and these kids like still like the parents go, hey, my kid was reaching out, maybe you guys could have like a little time that it's just all about play, or kind of getting to know what's going on. And everybody's schedule is a little bit different, but these kids are doing amazing things. I mean, some of the kids that are here, one just got his drone license, and Judah's now 15. Another is like just winning a scholarship. One was a state finalist for a 3M thing. I think, again, it's mindful, intentional instruction. It is mindful, intentional. This is what we do. If the kids, like sometimes they would like to play Kahoot, or what is that? There's another one that I'm terrible at that's always about the imposter. I can't remember. It starts with a B. I can't remember. They'll get mad at me that I can't remember, but I'm so terrible at it. I think I put it away. But if they ever get mean, I shut it down. I was like, nope, not on my planet. We're kind. You don't have anything nice to say. We're shutting it down. See you later. And so it was funny. This one kid from Boston who could like occasionally drop a bomb right in the middle of something. You're like, hey, you. And he's like, oh yeah, but that you did really great. So do you know what I mean? I think sometimes and again, anybody listening to this, I am so not judging, because it's like I know this in what I'm doing with my own grandkids, but it's like, it's all about, it takes longer to have these conversations of like, no, we're not going to play on that game, because it's like there are too many ads and I can't trust what's popping up in that ad, right? Even if you hand your kid the phone, still be looking over the shoulder going, whoa, wait a minute. That's not the game we're playing. Any of those kind of constraints. And life is busy and it gets hard to do that. But that intentionality, I think, has to be a piece that we all take in, and especially the companies producing the games and producing these online ways. There's a beautiful platform called Zigazoo, if parents don't know about it. And it's a way for kids to interact, to post like basically I pose a question, what's your favorite planet? And they kind of come on, but they're not in touch with one another. They can just watch one another. And there's no way for them to contact each other or comment. It's just they're like, oh, look at these people, what their favorite planet is. So it's a bit of a safer way for kids to still feel like they have a voice or a social kind of network without having actual ways to connect all of those friendships.
Yeah, like a bulletin board sort of a thing, as us old timers might call it, right? So
exactly. Like, oh, somebody posted there. Oh, look what they like. Yeah, exactly. Which is a beautiful way to do it and keeps people safe. Founded by educators who had kids of their own and wanted to create a safe way for them to interact and be online. So I would say for me, that's one of the most beautiful platforms that I've found. And, and I've heard from teachers, whether you're using Flipgrid or Google Classroom or any of these other things, Microsoft has a suite of products. The schools try to shut it down for anything that can get through, always trying to create a safer and safer place. But again, kids want to also like check out and like do some research. So that sometimes hinders that process. So it's back to what you're talking about. Where is that perfect balance? And there may just not be one.
I think it evolves. It evolves within the organization every time. Yep.
So
well, good.
Yeah. But it's like I said, reason I like hanging out with kids is that they will surprise you with their genius. And when they get turned on a little bit, that they have some autonomy to create and innovate, that I think is powerful. Or when they feel like, oh, I might be able to exact change, and how would you? Posing some of those questions is also very poignant, because they'll go, yeah, adults shouldn't do that. And I'm like, you are right. So there's grand hope. Go spend a few minutes with a classroom full of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and your heart just might get a little bit of hope in it, going, you know what? We're not doing so bad. Okay. We just got to get them through middle school and high school and keep their hope alive.
Absolutely. So Janet, tell us a little bit about this. I mean, you're part of 2 organizations, right? Tell us about the 2 organizations that you're a part of.
Sure. Let me tell you first about Janet's Planet. I created it back in the late 90s. I was working with and for kids at a theme park of all things. And here I was at a place called Opryland in Nashville, working with and for kids, loving it. And the park was going to close. I looked around and thought, wait a minute. People had always called me Interplanet Janet from, Schoolhouse Rock. And I was like, I can't be that, but I wonder about Janet's Planet. So there was a an attorney of one of the kids, one of the dads was an attorney, and says, let's look this up trademark. Nobody owns Janet's Planet. I was like, all right, I'll plant my flag there, because at the time there was Bill Nye the Science Guy in Beekman's world. And there was a girl on Beekman's, but she tended to be like, what's happening? And I was like, wait a minute, where are the women being the champions of science? Plant my flag there on my own planet. So I've been doing that, and it's certainly evolved from interstitials on public television to live shows touring the country to summer camps to online presence and teaching. And, I leave tomorrow for South Africa to present space and science to students there. So for me, it's like it's the ever evolving kind of brand that is my own. And then Explore Mars is a policy and advocacy outreach organization designed really with the goal in mind of encouraging NASA and Congress to think about long-range exploration goals. And, if you've ever read Gerard O'Neill or, Robert Zubrin's A Case for Mars, there are many people who believe that it's like, again, the survival of the species depends on us venturing out among the stars. So I had attended the Human to Mars Summit that Explore Mars puts on every May in Washington, D.C. This year, it's May 16th through 18th at the National Academies of Sciences building. And at the time, they didn't have, when I first attended, I guess back in 2012, 13, they didn't really have a program for kids. And I was like, well, all you guys are kind of growing old. Who's going to carry on this mission, right? Because by the time we get there, and so they're like, okay, you can do whatever you want to do. So for several years, I made sure we either got Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, and we were, thinking about it, designing our cities on Mars and things like that. So in early 2019, the previous president, Artemis Westenberg, who lives in the Netherlands, wanted to kind of like promote and do more Explore Mars Europe, called to see if I would like to become president of Explore Mars. And I was like, don't you want somebody that has a bit more alphabet soup after their name? Like once I talked with their leadership, I was like, you could get any like doctor, somebody, whomever. And they're like, no, we like how your love of education. And, generally when we mention your name, everybody goes, I like that crazy girl. So again, it's kind of wild and wacky. It's like when I assumed the role of Explore Mars, I never, ever expected to preside over and during a pandemic. So we found ways, and we realized that whatever we did during that time, it's how people would remember us. So we did everything from drinks with Explore Mars to lots of free webinars and things like that. But maybe the best thing I can tell you that happened in 2019 when I became president. In 2016, I had spoken at the summit and basically, was asked to give a speech about how to create the best STEM pipeline. And I was like, listen, it's like, you cannot rely on me to do that for every student in the world. Wherever you are, you go out into your backyard, into your community, and you start doing the work. It's on all of us to create this STEM pipeline. And lo and behold, that was a hard year for me, because it's like I went up there, did a speech, was flying to Puerto Rico to work with students the next day, arrived in Puerto Rico to find out my mom had passed. So I quickly flew home. So fast forward, that was 2016. Fast forward to 2019, I'm standing out in the lobby of the National Academies of Sciences building, and a guy named Mac McCalway comes up and says, hey, I heard you back in 2016. I was like, what? He was like, I heard you. I was like, okay, tell me more. And he had gone to, basically was like, all right, I hear. Went to the Smithsonian, bought some like astronaut suits and helmets, and then went to Syrian refugee camps and was doing space and science there. Is now like already has super developed this huge, amazing outreach in the country of Jordan, well, complete with, analog missions, and is helping all kinds of students. And so sometimes I feel like that's my wink to my mom, because she had just had a surgery. And I said, hey, Mom, I don't have to go. I can stay home. And she's like, oh, your dad's going to take care of me. Go and do what you do for the children. And so it wasn't until I kind of sat down from like at the conference, and I think it was like it just hit me. It's like, thank you, Mama, for saying go. And again, I think Mac would have gotten there despite whatever I might have said or not said. But it was a powerful moment to realize sometimes you got to speak your truth, and you never know who out there really is hearing it, which reminds me of how Mr. Rogers talked about talking to his audience that he learned from Gabby Hayes to look at the camera like you're talking to that one other person. And Mr. Rogers firmly believed that that space between the speaker and hearer was holy ground, because one time he and his friend from seminary went to hear Henry Nouwen, that great, speaker and theologian, happened to not have made it to the venue. Some layperson ends up giving the homily and the sermon. Apparently, Mr. Rogers judges it the whole time, going, he missed that point, this point. And he's about to turn to his friend at the end of the whole matter and say, and his friend turns to him with tears streaming down his face and is like, "Oh, Fred, wasn't that exactly what we needed to hear today?" And so that is when Mr. Rogers was struck with that thing, that it's like whomever is supposed to hear that message, again, back to that intentionality, is that somehow that space between the speaker and the hearer, it will get dynamically, cosmically, divinely transmuted into what that particular person who is supposed to receive that message. And so I like to think that Mom was playing a big part in that whole exchange.
Great stories.
Your experiences, though, I mean, when you're interacting with these kids, what do you think is the most kind of surprising thing that you learned in that process? Like the one thing that maybe others don't see, because, I know I've worked in Scouts and I do mentoring through a couple of different programs here for students, most of whom high school age and older. And, there's just some things that perhaps things that you think they don't grasp, they grasp really well. So that would have been my surprise that some of these kids really do understand, more than you think that they do. So what was yours like?
We don't have enough time. Like, keep the tape rolling, kids. Back in 2019, when I started doing my camps. Now, I've got plenty of stories predating this, but this is one that it's like has carried through the last many years. There was a kid who had just had gotten through with kindergarten. And usually my hard and fast rule is they got to be a rising third grader, 8 and up. I love the little babies, but they are still little babies. So Lucas, my friend Lucas from New Jersey, is like rolling around on the floor, and I'm trying to talk about the solar system or the next, NASA mission. And I'm like, "You getting this, Lucas?" "Yeah, getting it all." And so you just have to let it go. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, because you kind of go, obvious, because you begin to assess ADHD, ADD, it's like you work with kids long enough. You're like, oh, on the spectrum somewhere, it doesn't matter to me. How can I modify for what all I'm getting here? And so the mom told me this story last year at the Human and Mars Summit. She goes, "It was the wackiest thing." She goes, "I spent the entire year of like getting a call from Lucas's teacher every day of kindergarten. Then he comes to your camp. The first day goes by. I've gotten no phone calls. I think you've lost my kid. Like, how can they not have been calling me about like him?" Because usually he was, may or may not have looked like he was paying attention. So the second day, she says, goes by. I still am not getting a call from you. I'm going, what are they doing? They're sticking him in a room. I don't know what's happening. So at some point on that Tuesday or Wednesday, his mom goes, "Lucas, what is going on? Your teacher spent the entire year last year telling me about how you were misbehaving or not listening. And why are the people who are running this camp not doing it?" He's like, "Mom, chill out. Janet totally loves me." That's what was surprising to me. Not only because when it's like you ask that kid to spit back what I was saying about black holes or rocket launches or this, that, or the other, he would tell you. He was totally the sponge absorbing it all. But the more crazy thing is, how did he know that I loved him? Because I did. I was just like, you spend enough time with kids, you're just like, it's what it's going to look like. All right, love ya. Can you just quieten down over there? Because I might have something to say. So he joined me all through the pandemic. And this is a little guy who recently gave a speech last year at the Human and Mars Summit. He's 8 years old. He would have been 8 last year, 8.5, and took 17 pages of notes. Another surprising thing, there was a girl who was selective mute. And again, not every parent will put down on the form things about their children. Either they think it's a reflection of them. It's really helpful. Again, I'm not going to judge ever. I'm just going to go, "Hey, how do I modify for you, precious little one?" But I knew she was a very just low talker, or she would tug on you and you'd go, what do you need? And you do a little bit of, you figure it out. And watching her blossom from 2019 to she was the NASA Junior Lunabotics competition winner. And she would always do the assignments anytime that you ask her to do them. She might not talk to you about them, And then she finally stood up, and when we had an astronaut come, and she asked a question out loud. So part of the answer to your question is, and again, I've got so many other stories of, there was a kid out of New York and on the spectrum. And the first time he joined us online, it's like he was stuffing down Oreos and really wanting to tell me about the Saturn V Lego set he had behind him. So I tried, I could tell it was like the parents were like trying to get the cookies, like, hey, Nathan, don't eat all the cookies, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, I like that Saturn V behind you. Tell me about that. All of a sudden, guys, this 12-year-old, well, the RS-25 is really my favorite engine, but, the Saturn 25, the Saturn V. And he was like, and, the SLS, I don't know why they call it the biggest rocket. It's only like a foot taller than the Saturn V. This kid knew his rocket stuff. And it was interesting. Later on, he's doing so great right now. He's joined a soccer team. There's other things that have happened. And his parents emailed me and said, you're the first place that actually let him speak and have a voice and didn't tell him to stop or to shut up or to not now, Nathan. So if we want our kids to thrive, again, it's hard, right? It's hard to give them all that space. It's hard. It's not hard. It's like, it's time consuming. It's energetically, you got to put the energy out there to give that. But for me, the secret sauce isn't anything that special except to go, let me hold space for however you are. And I will do this for you. I will try to do it for you. I will fail along the way because I'll have 30 of you in a class at sometimes, right? But when I can, I will see you and I will honor what makes you you. And to me, that's where I see that biggest thing happen, is that once you acknowledge what's they're interested in, important, okay, well, let's travel down that. I had a kid who loves snakes. She was joining me like, hey, you want to see my snake, Toby? And I'm like, in person, no, but that's a very cute snake. Thanks for sharing. So how I got her to love space was like, hey, have they ever taken a snake to space? I don't know, snakes on a plane. So she came back, she goes, I found that she was so excited. She wanted to tell us about how they took geckos and that NASA was coming up with technology imitating the geckos. So you just got to find what they're interested in, kind of give them a nudge and point them down that path. And, for me personally, it happens in the micro, not always in the macro. I mean, I'm with even all the kids that I've Zoomed with in the last many years, of the kids that I've appeared in front of, I don't know how many got the message. A few did, because it's like I've had a few one-on-one experiences to let me know that I know that something transpired. Hopefully they'll hang on to it. But you got to hold that space for them to be as they are and encourage them.
And, interacting with kids, I've learned is, I'm talking about almost adult kids, like big toddlers, right, on the teenage spectrum, side of the world. And so what's interesting is, this is when they're reading more books. And I know one of the things that we have these pre-screeners that, kind of make these phone calls and, kind of get an idea of, some of to learn a little bit more about you. And one of the books that I noticed you recommended was The Road to Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. And, I think the interesting thing is that, that's a business book that, talks about, decisions and those sorts of things. But, I can see that you're a quick decision maker, and you have to be when you're working with your more colorful minds, and some of which have no filter, obviously. But, ultimately, I noticed that the younger the kids get, that I interact with. So, having done scouts and as well, I can relate to, some of the challenges of, the one kid that is kind of all over the place and is actually listening, but being diligent and, making sure that when you're leading things, that there's just a smarter way to do things. And it's really about listening and understanding your audience and those sorts of things. But, I am curious about, with that book, one of your books, what other things that are going on that excite you about the future, and what in terms of some of these books that you have read that talk to that problem, leadership or dealing with challenging situations, where do you think that our future is headed in terms of kind of the overall approach to the reading side of the house and reading books and consuming things? And, everyone's so digitally connected. Even my own 20-year-old son would rather watch a video than read a book these days. And so I do wonder, that specific part of the future, what's it going to look like? Is everything going to be in a video? Is it going to be in one of these great books that we read, or is it something else?
I think about another great book is by Tony Wagner of Harvard, and it's like basically creating the innovators of the future. And he says in there that we should let our children play, and in the midst of their play, they may find their passion, and in the midst of their passion, they may find their purpose. Here's what's interesting. I can talk about my middle stepson. It's like he hated to read in high school, and now he's a voracious reader. And so, I think it's allowing that time and space, and sometimes it's a nudge. You hear them like, oh, you might really like this book. It was really fascinating. I don't know. It's like, here's a thing, blah, 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 because again, with teenagers, you got to be super aloof and not care too much, because they will smell a rat and go, oh, I know what you're trying to do. So you're like, yeah, you throw it out there, whatever you think about. I really don't worry about the kids. Like, to me, it's like governments. I don't know, man. Don't go into governments, kid. It's like, or because it's like the people are good. It doesn't matter whether I'm working with kids in the US or Wales or Pakistan or any place. These kids are good, and they want good things. They want innovation that matters. They want to see humans, living, working, thriving on the moon, in space, doing amazing things. They want like artificial intelligence and a robot that makes pizza. That's a funny one. If you ask any kid ever, like, what do you want? Like, what would be the most helpful for your life right now that you could innovate? It's usually a robot that cleans their room and also makes a pizza. So I don't worry so much about what I believe they are innately able to do. I worry that the construct of the world is going to ultimately harm that vision. Yeah. And that's why I think should be a universal mandate. Hey, grown-ups, be better. Start being better. Lock it down. Stop being crazy. Let's control the violence. Let's control the kind of like incendiary kinds of, I think I said that word wrong, but you guys know what I mean. I'm from the South, but it's like, I think it's just doggone time. It's like, grown-ups, lock it down, be better and do better. And because it's like, I'm tired of hearing people complain about kids. I'm around kids. Yeah, they'll give you the honest opinion, but it's usually spot on. So the kids aren't the ones I worry about. It's the construct of our world and the grownups running those constructs that I worry about the most.
Gotcha. Well, I know that if we had all the time in the world, we'd be able to ask a lot more questions. But I think there's one thing that we have to absolutely cover, and that is, now if you could go back in time and give yourself advice as a younger kid, what would it be?
Golly. I grew up in Covington, Tennessee, home of the Charms Blow Pop and the birthplace of Isaac Hayes. It is a couple of stop signs on Highway 51, 19 miles down Highway 59. You got the Mississippi River and a lot of cotton fields and soybean fields. And, I was blessed. Really, truly blessed to grow up in this little small town. I started school the year busing started. I had the most magnificent African-American teachers, Miss Dorothy Davidson, Miss Ernestine Yarborough Jones, who made me love the solar system, Miss Rosella Hall, who was the librarian, who was constantly going, Janet, I believe you will love this book. And you're like, yes, ma'am. I couldn't wait to go to the library. And so those very smart women really showed me the path to reading and knowledge. So in that regard, I was really lucky. I think if I went back in time, though, I'd go, hey, sweetie, you're not going to believe it. Those books that you're reading that you think you'll never get there. I remember reading a book about a girl on a boat with a passport. And that was so far away from my blue collar family of a plumber and a seamstress that we would ever have a boat, like be on a boat, much less have a passport. So even as I think about leaving to go to South Africa tomorrow, that's what I'd be whispering to that little girl. It'd be like, you will have your passport. You will do things and be able to speak with people that you'll even have astronauts who call you for stuff. And yeah, it's surprising. And that's, I guess, what I would say to anybody. It's like, especially those of us who might have grown up in rural America. And, thankfully I had parents who wanted better for me, but I would just tell them, I was like, little girl, hang on. It just keeps getting better and better. The older you get, the more you get to do.
Nice. So I often reflect on the small town, right? Same for John and I, we grew up in small towns. So from a small town to Mars, as the president of Explore Mars, I understand that the goal here is to ensure human exploration sometime in the 2030s, in line with, we've seen also in terms of executive orders and at least all the way back to the early 2000s. So
yeah.
But I think if anything, what I want to make sure of is that we having a better idea on how we can help cascade your message so you can kind of, because we agree, we think it's an important objective. I've worked on projects and initiatives myself within scientific communities on that, but people need to know where to find you. So tell us, where do they find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sure. You really through either exploremars.org. We want you to get involved. We want you to be part of that conversation. If you want to get in touch with me personally, there's a contact form through janetsplanet.com. You know, the 2033 timeline has been sort of a presidential mandate. There are folks who go, we have the rockets, we have the capabilities. What we don't necessarily, and the Orion capsule with that Artemis 1 mission really proved that this, it went further than any human rated spacecraft has ever gone. So, things are looking very good that module could do very well on its way out to Mars. The problem is the Martian atmosphere is very thin. You see these rovers coming in hot, and you got to deploy all kinds of parachutes and all these things. We want humans to arrive there safely. We want them to be able to thrive, to eat. The first missions are probably going to be go there, stay there about 30 days, and then return home. But that still is going to be a 3.5 year proposition. I think 2033 is still the goal of everybody that I know, and that's 10 years off if we stay away from global conflicts. Because when you think about if global conflicts happen, that money is going to be allocated elsewhere. So it might be late 2030s, but I think by 2045, 2050, this generation will have witnessed those first footprints on the red planet. And I actually think there's probably either a fifth grader to a high schooler somewhere right now that will be those first boot prints on Mars.
Fantastic. So thanks for such a deep dive into some of your experiences. I know that our listeners are always looking forward to something refreshing and exciting of what's happening in STEM, as well as understanding kind of the risks of being online. So we covered quite a few things, but
and a very safe, I'm so sorry. If I can just add, a very safe place for grownups to go if you're looking for some great STEM resources is NASA Next Gen STEM. Just put those words into the Google search or the browser search, and it comes up, and you've got lots of stuff for young kids, lots of stuff for high school kids. But talk about a safe place to go. I've got many of those things on my website as well. But again, as you venture out to what is safe, NASA's Kids Place or Space Place or NASA Next Gen STEM are some of the safest I know.
Fantastic. And I know that people can also find you on LinkedIn. I did so myself successfully. And we do know that there's obviously lots of resources on everyone's LinkedIn profiles and some of the things that you've done. So I do encourage folks to go to LinkedIn to learn a little bit more about Omnistruct, but most importantly, Janet, thank you for your time. We'd also like to thank our audience, and I know I'm stealing John's thunder. John's normally the one that closes these out. So, but for those listening, if you learned something today, or if you laughed a little bit, if not at least at me and my ridiculous shirt that I'm wearing today, please tell somebody about the podcast.
There's mine.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there's an astronaut
now,
there.
Coordinated. I would have worn my JPL shirt for the Mars rover project. So there it is. It's been another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. We're your hosts, John and George. Janet Ivey is our excellent guest. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all for joining another great episode of Pineapple on Pizza. You can find show notes, links, and resources by visiting omnistruct.com/blog. And a huge thank you to all who are preventatively protecting organizations from cyber threats.